Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here, and today marks the 3-month anniversary for the Pan American Battleships full release into the game. So it was on this day, 3 months ago, day of recording, that these mighty Pan American battleships left early access and were able to be grinded out by the masses. So I thought that since this was the case, we take a look at the Pan American battleships and see how they're doing, because we are getting quite close to the time frame at which wargaming typically starts making adjustments to newly released tech-line ships. Wargaming, again, usually waits about 4-ish months after a line has been fully released to start making adjustments. There's only so much they can do in their in-house testing and then in the super test program. Once a ship gets into everybody's hands, the way that the ship performs might shift one way or another. So they typically give us some time with the ship in its current state, and then they start making changes. So let's take a peek at that. Real quick though, if you have no idea what the Pan American battleships are, like even somehow avoiding them in matchmaking or living under a rock, they are a line of hyper-aggressive secondary brawlers. The Tier 9, the Los Andes, and the Tier 10, the Libertad, are armed with secondaries that are bigger than a fair chunk of high-tier cruiser guns. Because naturally so. They're Goliath guns, actually, which is completely funny. On top of having an excellent acceleration and maneuverability profile, these ships also get a funny button. That's right, a funny button on battleships that already have amazingly large secondary guns. The funny button does a couple of things. The combat instructions, it increases the secondary battery firing range by 20%, decreases the reload time by 15%, and increases the damage that the shells do by 25% for 30 seconds. So for 30 seconds, you're a real pain for anybody in your secondary range, and it's glorious watching it go off, because the Libertad, for example, gets your secondaries out to 15.1 kilometers with that running, which is so stupid. But anyway, so let's take a look at the stats of these ships. So it's a little surprising. I knew that these ships were going to be performing pretty dang well, given just how they are, but I didn't expect this. So both the Libertad and the Los Andes are leading their respective tiers in terms of win rate, average kills, average damage, and average experience earned. That's right, in four of the 5 major categories that we look at when determining how ships are performing, they are crushing it. Keep that in mind. Average kills, win rate, average damage, and average experience earned.
Shit.
That's crazy, considering the Libertad is beating out legends like the Bourgogne. The Bourgogne is a still ship that you have to, of course, grind out still in order to acquire. You know who earns a lot of still? Veteran players, highly experienced players that play a lot of ranked, that play a lot of clan battles. They're the ones earning still and buying the Bourgogne. That's why it's such a crazy good ship stats-wise, because you have very, very highly skilled players typically playing the Bourgogne. But the Libertad is beating it. God, that's so crazy when I pulled that up. What's really interesting is that the Ipiranga, on the other hand, though, is actually like dead middle in terms of all of that for Tier 8. For win rate, I mean, it is, it is, right there in the middle of the road, for win rate, for average kills, average damage done. It's about average for a Tier 8 battleship, which, makes you think. Granted, it doesn't have the Goliath guns that you find on the Los Andes and the Libertad, which probably has a lot to do with it. So there is that. So, yeah, that's a little nuts. Now, what is it about these ships that make them so daggum good? Well, like I mentioned, the whole having Goliath caliber secondary guns is probably playing a pretty big factor into it. It makes your damage income so easy to obtain. And the background matches you'll be watching, you see one match where, well, the first match, I don't really aim all that well in this match, to say the least, with the main battery guns on the Libertad, which it still has 12 16-inch guns at tier 10. The accuracy is not all that great, though. It's very Grosser Curve firsty in terms of the accuracy. Every now and then you get a pretty decent salvo out of the Libertad, but not all that much. The secondaries, on the other hand, especially once you have them built up in terms of accuracy, I mean, they are fairly accurate. Not that you really need to get that many shells to land to be doing big damage numbers, because, again, you have Goliath caliber secondary guns, 20 of them on the Libertad. Then, of course, when you get the combat instructions built up, you just hit F, and now you're doing 25% more damage per shell with a 15% buff to the reload time and a 20% buff to the range of your secondary guns. So now you're getting the secondary guns that were already doing a crazy amount of damage base, doing more damage at longer range and firing faster for 30 seconds. And by the way that you fill up these combat instructions is you get main battery gun hits, or you just get shot at. It gets built up on potential damage done. So you literally just get shot at, and these secondary combat instructions will fill up. You pop it, let it run for 30 seconds. If you're in the middle of it, too, in the thick of it, there's a very good chance that, that combat instructions bar is just going to be filled up like that. That's just how it works. So it does incentivize you to, kind of play more aggressively and take risks and such, which does lead to another interesting statistic here. So while the Libertad and Los Andes are leading in terms of win rate, average kills, average damage, and average experience earned, they are not leading at all by kill-to-death ratio. So, that's pretty interesting. In fact, Libertad's toward the bottom of the list when you have the stats page set for that. And then the Los Andes, oddly enough, a little bit higher there at tier 9. It's fourth from the top, so that's interesting. Again, that's more indicative. That's probably indicative of that, hyper aggressive playstyle that is encouraged by playing the Pan American Battleships. So they've got all that going for them. Is this enough to say it's time to nerf them? Well, another big caveat is that the Libertad and Los Andes and the Ipiranga, they all at the current time, they all have under 200,000 battles played, which is a very small sample size considering, what we have in terms of battles played with other battleships. Most other battleships that aren't, brand new or within, a couple of updates of the current update, they have, hundreds of thousands, 600, 500,000 battles played, millions of battles played. So their stats are a little bit more equalized by this point. But it's interesting because, I see Libertads and Los Andes and Ipirangas everywhere. They're being played a lot by a lot of players of varying skill sets, and yet their stats are still exceptionally high. I've seen many a Libertad and Los Andes get murdered in the first few minutes of the match because, well, they want to get in there, they want to use their secondary guns, they don't play smartly, and, well, now they're sunk. But yet, they're still beating out ships like they're gone in terms of average damage done and win rate and average kills, which is absolutely wild. I mean, I guess when you do have AI doing most of the heavy lifting for you, that's how that's going to go. So, do they need a nerf looking at these stats? Well, maybe. There are a couple things about them that I do think is absolutely goofy given the rest of their characteristics. Again, like the Libertad. I'm talking most about the Libertad because the Libertad is the ship that I have the most experience with in terms of, what I have played in game. And, the Los Andes is very similar to it. It's the tier 9, right? So, the Libertad, you get the 20 Goliath guns, you get the combat instructions, you get the improved heal, you get the improved maneuverability, and the improved speed. Which is absolutely wild that what is supposed to be a Dreadnought-type battleship has some of the best acceleration maneuverability parameters at tier 10. Better than a lot of the battle cruisers too, which is just, again, goofy. It maneuvers like a battle cruiser, or really like a large, heavy cruiser, but it's got, battleship armor, and well, it's kind of got battleship HP. The HP is lower by about 20,000 than your average tier 10 battleship HP. Yes, you do get the improved heal to kind of, balance that out, but it's still pretty low in the HP department. And that is something about the Pan American battleships. They are great, hyper aggressive brawlers. They are very scary for 30 seconds, but man, do they absolutely crumble under concentrated fire. Now, obviously, any ship in game is going to go down under sustained concentrated fire. But you've got, ships like the GK and the Kremlin and the Montana with the right build on it that are very durable and can hold out for quite some time under that, concentrated fire. Libertad, not so much. Same with the Los Andes, too. Again, that's where that 20k deficit in HP comes into factor with the Libertad. If you can jump it and you can stay on it and murder it through its one heal that it gets before it has to go on cooldown, yeah, it is a very easy target to sink if your team focus fires it down, which you see a lot of teams doing because understandably so. If you do let it live, it's going to be a pain in your side, especially if you do get into secondary range of it, right? So a lot of teams are dogpiling these ships when they see them, but again, the stats are still so high, and that is one reason why the KD is so poor on the Libertad, right? So there is that. But in terms of like the secondaries and the gimmick, I don't really think that necessarily needs to be adjusted. But the maneuverability and the speed, I've always taken issue with that this ship is such a secondary DPM hose. It's so crazy when it's in that close range. The fact that it can drive in circles around you, it can really sell circles around pretty much any other tier 10 battleship except for a handful, right? Because of how maneuverable and the good acceleration and such that it does get. So if that gets cranked down, then I think it'll be a much more balanced ship. And I've been saying that for quite some time, but I mean, now look at these stats too. I'm more in the line of it's probably going to catch a nerf. And I would think that would be the nerf board game we'd go with first before they start, actually messing with the secondaries. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm not I can't predict the future, right? I don't have a magic crystal ball, right? But, two, another thing that makes the Libertad so insane is Mr. Joaquim Lisboa, the unique commander, the special commander. What were they called? Unique commander, legendary commanders. The names have been changed a couple of times. He's kind of nuts on these Pan American battleships. The fact that you just have to pop your combat instructions twice, and now the bar is permanently filled up by 25%. That makes it so easy to keep popping the combat instructions on these ships. And of course, once you get 175 main and secondary gun hits, you get another boost to the reload time of your secondary guns, which is absolutely crazy, right? So you get his boost, which is a 15% buff to the reload time, and then of course you factor in things like Adrenaline Rush, and then the gimmick on top of that, and you have Goliath guns firing at just completely ridiculous rates. At 15 kilometers, doing 25% more damage because of the combat instructions. So he's kind of nuts, and maybe he needs to be looked at too, on top of, the Libertad and the rest of the Pan American battleship line. He probably should be nerfed directly, I would imagine, rather than the rest of the line, because, well, he's not even available anymore at the moment. You could get him in his event when the ships came out, but currently you can't pick him up. So, I don't know. He probably needs to be tweaked too, because he's also pretty goofy on a couple of other Pan American ships like we've seen here on the channel, like with the Growl, right? So, yeah. These ships are doing really well right now. I'm sure a good amount of these stats are because we did have the early access event where, the players that wanted these ships were players that love brawling, know how to make brawling work, and in today's World of Warships, they're the ones that threw their wallets at the screen to get these ships early, right? So they've probably have padded these stats a little bit, but I mean, here we are 3 months later of them being available in the general public's hands, and they're still leading their leaderboards, which is nuts at the moment. But we'll see what happens from here on out. Maybe they'll get nerfed, maybe they won't. It should be happening pretty soon, one way or another, if they do or don't get nerfed. So keep your eye on the channel for that devblog video if it does ever get made. So guys, let me know what you guys think about the Libertad and the rest of her line. Do they need to be nerfed? Are you liking where they're at right now? Let me know that jazz in the comments down below. Hope you guys have a wonderful Wednesday, wonderful rest of your week. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.